So let's get moving. So just to introduce myself, my name is Dave Sullivan. Everybody calls me Sully. My experience with FileMaker started in about 2005 when the window and siding company that I was working at took on a FileMaker solution to track all of its customers. So I worked at that company for a long time doing a lot of sales and marketing related stuff. So towards the end of my tenure there, I was their in-house FileMaker developer. I inherited a solution that was passed through 5 other developers' hands. It's a little bit of a mess, and I cleaned it up enough that I was able to move on from the company. Also went to DevCon in 2018 and handed out a bunch of squirt guns, and in 2019 as well. If you've met me before in person, I probably put a squirt gun in your hand. So that's 7,000 of them. All of them are full. It's a kiddie pool full of squirt guns. We used to hand them out at public events in order to draw attention to our window and siding company. So one other thing you might be wondering about, this is not a wine barrel. That's a Lagavulin 20-year-old Scotch barrel. So if you really, really, really like this presentation, go ahead and go to your liquor store, walk down the aisle where they keep all the single malt Scotch, and pick a donation to send to the address at the end of the presentation. We'll be friends forever. So also want to do some acknowledgments real quick. I want to thank Kevin Hammond for inviting me to speak today and all the guys at DB Services. I also want to thank all the folks that joined us today from other FileMaker developer groups, especially the guys that I know personally. It means the world that you're here to support me. And if I don't know you, then here I am. So hopefully you'll enjoy this. So Kevin, I don't know if you've already started the recording or not, but if you haven't, now would be a good time. So FileMaker and Twilio together. So here's the gist. So FileMaker can only take you so far. There's a lot of things that FileMaker can do that are really amazing, but there is a place where the water's edge stops and you have to go somewhere beyond it. My goal is to try to give people, especially developers, a way of extending the capabilities of FileMaker far beyond what is possible with the native tools that are available in FileMaker. As Mandelbrot, that means that I can do all of these things that generalists do. WebDirect and FileMaker Go and Cloud and Pro and Server are things that a lot of these different Claris partners are very well versed at. And I'm an AWS certified cloud practitioner, so I understand a lot of the other things that are in AWS's realm of influence, especially FileMaker hosting. If you need some help trying to start up a FileMaker hosting business, I have some resources for you. You should check my website. However, the thing that most people don't use in FileMaker is Twilio. They don't connect their phones the same way that they connect everything else. So here's why this is important. So how much do you guys actually like robocalls? Do you enjoy getting robocalls? What's your response to them? Not a big fan. I see a lot of people shaking their heads. So everybody's got a different way to ignore robocalls, and none of them really seem to work. More than half of the calls that come in nowadays, according to the FCC, are placed by a robot. So what does that do? It means that people don't answer their phones anymore. In iOS 13, they actually added a feature where if the phone number isn't saved in your contacts, it just won't answer. It'll go straight to voicemail. So there's one thing to take out of the presentation. Look in your phone settings and turn off all of those calls, right? So the other thing that happens is you have a heavier reliance on text and email. Well, FileMaker is okay at doing email, but there's no native support for text messaging. It's really difficult to get the messages in and out unless you have a pretty serious desire to do it. You also have lost productivity. Now, if you're looking at the live feed, you see I have 2 pairs of Sennheiser M2 noise canceling headphones. These things are awesome. They're $500 a piece, but I can't hear anything. Like I tune everything out when I'm writing code. The reason I do that is because if there's a problem that comes up via my phone, if I get distracted, then it might take me half an hour to get back into what I'm doing. I don't want to spend that time. I'd rather just keep writing code. Or if you get on a roll, you want to get all the way to the end of it. Also, in our post-Robocall society, you have customer disenfranchisement. So a lot of times as a business owner, it's not necessarily about how good your product is, it's about how well you know your customers. There's a really cool line from Mad Men. Roger Sterling says, half the time in this business, it comes down to, I don't like that guy. So you have to foster that relationship with your customers and really be able to know who they are. And a lot of times a text message or an email or just having them plunk their credit card number into your website isn't going to be enough for that. These people are trusting you with their businesses. So it's really important to have that relationship, and usually that means having long phone conversations. There's also a longer sales cycle. So if it takes you longer in order to convert a prospect into a customer, there's more chances that they might just not end up buying anything. Shortening your sales cycle is one of the best things you can do in order to try to convert more leads into customers. So there's also just straight up rage. So no one really likes getting robocalls. It's just painful. So who does your business phones is really the question that you need to take out of this. So write it on your hand with a magic marker. You get one thing out of this. Who does your business phones? It's a question you should ask every single one of your customers. If you're in-house, it should be something you ask your boss. Who does our phones? Right? I spend $80 a month on one cell phone, right? But most of the companies that have phones, they spend a lot more than that. And as a technologist, as somebody that's trying to provide solutions to people for FileMaker and maybe a couple other things, you really should be thinking about, well, how many other different services can I sell these people? And how many other ways can I integrate FileMaker so that they don't have their phone system completely separated from the rest of their data? Now, if you take out this little Y right here, who does our phones? As Claris partners, I went onto the Claris partner search website. So it's the one where you can see there's 7 shops in Indiana, there's 12 shops in Illinois, right? And if you open up each one of them and copy their phone numbers out and then run them through Twilio's lookup, you can find out what type of phone is connected to that number. 27, almost 28% of them are VoIP phones. So they're phones that are kind of like the ones that you see on the right side of my live feed, where they're connected to somebody's desk. If you have a VoIP phone, chances are you probably have somebody sitting there to answer it. But if you have a landline or a mobile phone, there's probably nobody other than you that's going to answer that. Landlines also don't do any text messaging, and mobile phones, if you're using that for business, then you're going to end up with a lot of robocalls that come in that knock you off of what you're doing. So as far as this goes, what we're going to do first, I'm not going to try to get too deep into the code. Instead, what I'm going to do is just show you some of the things that you can do with FileMaker and Twilio together. So we're going to start off with 3 quick demos of FileMaker and Programmable Voice. The first one is doing business from anywhere, then using your FileMaker CRM as a caller ID, and then ways to stop robocalls. So do business from anywhere. So I have this application that I wrote in FileMaker. It's called Mandelbrot PBX. So this isn't finished, so I can't do everything with this yet. But what I can do is I can place phone calls from Mandelbrot PBX with my business line's phone number. So can everybody see my live feed? You can see the spaceship that's in my basement, right? I'm assuming that's a yes. So I'm going to do this from FileMaker Go. So imagine for a second you're out of the office, somebody sends you a text message or an email or something, and you need to respond right now because it's a critical problem. If I punch in the number, hopefully you guys can see me doing this, for my office, I can call from my office line. The first thing that's going to happen is the phone's going to connect, right? It's going to try to connect the first line. When I answer, it's going to try to call my business.
Thank you for calling Mandelbrot LLC. If you need to speak with someone in our office, press 0 now. If you'd rather be texted, just hang up and text. Thank you for calling Mandelbrot LLC. If If you need to speak with someone in our office, press 0 now. If you'd rather...
Okay, you guys get the idea, right? So being able to work from anywhere without having to be tied to your desk phone, and more importantly, using your cell phone to use your business phone as the caller ID is one of the most important things you can do in order to keep your personal cell phone number private. Everybody's got a customer that they wish they never texted because those people just keep calling them. They call them on Sundays, especially now that there's nothing to mark the time with all the things going on with COVID. There's no boundaries anymore. People assume that they can just get you on the phone right away. That's not really very cool, right? So let's talk about using your FileMaker CRM as a caller ID. So I'm going to pop open this little guy. He's my buddy. I call him the interceptionist. So I'm also going to pop open, I can find it. Okay, so here's my dummy CRM. I'm going to simulate a call from my New York office to my home office. So here's my home office's phone number. If I hit call, it's going to ask me what's my point of origin. Do I want to call from my desk or do I want to call from my cell phone? So I'm going to call from my desk. It's going to call the desk. You guys can see over here. Turn this up. And when I answer this, then it's going to call and it pops up.
Thank you for calling
Mandelbrot, New York.
If you need to speak with someone in our office.
So you notice one thing I want to point out with this is as soon as that phone picks up and says, you've reached Mandelbrot LLC, press 0. That's when the CRM pops open. So if I'm sitting at my workstation trying to get something done, I can see who's calling before they even hit 0, before my cell phone rings. If that person hits 0, then it rings my cell phone. That's also really great because if they hit 0 and I'm unable to answer the phone or I'm doing something important and my phone's muted, it's going to go to my cell phone's voicemail. It's not going to go into a second voicemail system. It really makes it a lot easier to run a business, especially if it's just you, if you're a soloist or an independent, and you don't want to have to deal with all these messages coming in from a dozen different places. It also means that when you answer the phone, instead of saying, hey, this is Mandelbrot LLC, how can I help you? And then having to take their phone number out of your desk phone and punch it into your CRM, the record is just popped up for you. You don't have to worry about looking for anything. So hopefully by now you're already thinking about some of your customers that could use something like this. But here's the thing that you might want to use for yourself, stopping robocalls. So I'm going to punch in my phone number here. Actually, let's pop this open too. Okay. So I'm going to call from my cell phone, which is not saved in the CRM. So when I call from the cell phone, it starts calling.
For calling Mandelbrot LLC.
I'm going to mute that for a second. It doesn't come up in the CRM, but it has this White Pages Pro caller ID. I can see I'm on T-Mobile. Here's my phone number. I'm a person, not a business. I'm between 35 and 39 years old. I'm male. There's a couple addresses and a bunch of people that might be associated. Now listen carefully to what happens when it ends.
To speak with someone in our office, press 0 now. If you'd rather be texted, just hang up and text. Thank you.
There's no voicemail at the end. There's nowhere to leave a message. If you don't hit 0, then the call is dropped. So how many robocallers hit 0? Probably none, right? So without that voicemail stuck to the end, I have never received a robocall on my business line ever. Never had one. It's pretty awesome. So let's move on to the, oh, so many windows open. On we go. So how do we do all of this with Twilio? So Twilio is just like any other set of building blocks or any other API. It's just like Legos. It allows you to build complex solutions out of very simple tools and API calls. So here's some basics about how this works. We'll back up 2 steps. Where do you start? What's their version of Hello World? How do you integrate it? The first thing that you're going to need is a free Twilio account. So the accounts are free. They come with $10 to $15 worth of development credit. You attach a credit card to it. You pay ahead. So you put in 40 or 50 bucks into there and it lasts forever. So everything I did, by the way, just now cost less than 10 cents. So I haven't barely spent anything at all. It's very cheap. And once you have this set of account credentials, it gives you an account SID and an auth token. That's your username and your password. Now, that's what you're going to use in order to access their APIs. It's going to be sent along with every API call. If you want to set up a second account, you can become the phone company. You can create a sub account where that account is billed separately. It still comes out of the same grand total, but it's on your bill as a separate number. So again, I think about who does your business phones, right? You could take over the phones at any one of your customers' companies and bill them however much you want based on usage, because it separates it out on your bill, right? It's also really great if you don't want to leave your root credentials in something you're building for someone. You can create a second set of credentials for development only. That way, if you accidentally leave them in there, you can just set up a new account for that or replace your development credentials. So the second thing that you're going to need is insert from URL. So how many of your folks are familiar with insert from URL? Hopefully most of you, right? So insert from URL has three different things that you need. You have a response, you have a URL where you're sending the request, and you have curl, which are the options. So you're calling an outside service. It's how you send information to Twilio. You have to know where you're sending the information, that's the URL. You have to know what you're sending, which is curl. And then you have to have a place where it comes back to in your FileMaker solution. If you've ever used Postman, this is probably not anything that you're unfamiliar with. Twilio actually has their own version of it. It's called the API Explorer. So I'm going to pop out of this real quick and show you the API Explorer because it's awesome. So to get to the API Explorer, I have all these things docked on the left side of my Twilio dashboard. You can also just type it into the search bar here, API Explorer, right? Or if you want to do it this way, it is down here in the runtime stuff. I have it pinned because I use it a lot. So let's take a look at one of the things that I did there with lookup. So view a lookup phone number. So that's a get, right? Push, what is it? Post, get, delete, patch, like all those different wonderful REST API commands, right? So if I want to use Twilio's API Explorer, I can punch in a phone number here, right? You see how that phone number is over here? So as you're making changes on the left, it writes the code for you on the right. So this URL, that's the URL that you need for insert from URL. The stuff that's behind it on that line, that's the stuff you need as a curl option. Now, it's not an exact one-to-one match. There is some formatting that you're still going to have to do. If you get stuck, you can always call or text me. I'll help you out. So the other thing that's really awesome about this is that you can put in add-ons. Like I use the add-on White Pages Pro Caller ID, right? If I hit make request, oh, I need to do White Pages. I'm going to expand this out. All that information that popped up in that little window is all returned as JSON. So FileMaker, since version 16, has had some really awesome tools for picking out pieces of this JSON in order to add them to whatever layout or whatever window that you want. So let's look at another one real quick. Programmable SMS. Now, these are real calls that are being sent out. I'm going to create a message. I'm going to send it to my cell phone. I'm going to send it from my main number, and the body is going to be, I'll just do hello. All of the information that's after that web address, that's my curl options. right? So even if you're not used to doing insert from URL, you can put this stuff together at blazing speed using the API Explorer. Here's my my URL, and if I send the message, I make the request, it's actually, it makes a real request, right? Hang on, there's the text message. So that message goes through. This is what the response that you get from their API. This comes back to FileMaker in that insert from URL. So this information is available to whatever script you're running, which is really useful. So let's keep going. Cool. Go full screen. On we go. So simple outbound SMS. So I promise you guys a kind of a top-down view of this stuff. Part of the problem, I think, with Twilio is that people don't know how to sell it. And one of the most important pieces you have to explain to your clients is that more communication channels is more money. So here's a case study. The remodeling company I used to work at, 500,000 outbound sales calls a year. Only 12% of the people would answer the calls. It's a statistic, it's a real number from 2018. In 2010, that was 40%. So a room that had 12 people in it used to have everybody on the phone all the time. But as the amount of robocalls kept going up, the amount of people who would answer their phones when they didn't recognize the number, that went way down. So what I did was I added a text message. So every time they make a phone call, they click what happened on the call at the end of the call. If they clicked that it went to voicemail, then it would send this text message. It also had a couple pieces of information in there that were specific to the customer. So by doing that, 22% answered rate. Now, that might not sound like a big jump, but it's almost double. If you look at the numbers for just cell phones, it was closer to 50%. So the problem they had, they didn't have cell phone numbers for everybody. A lot of them were landlines, and you can't text a landline, right? But again, when you're selling this stuff, an extra 400 estimates a year, what does that mean to the person buying it? It means that $350 per estimate, they're making $140,000 more per year. So between the two owners, they each got 70 grand just by changing around a little bit of code. Now, if I'm just a guy selling this solution as a generalist or as an independent developer or as an in-house guy, how much is reasonable for me to ask the owners to pay me? Is it $14,000? Is it $70,000? I don't know. It depends on your deal. But if I was doing this just as somebody who's just a FileMaker developer, I would think that I would ask for at least $5,000 or $10,000 to connect something like this. It's not that difficult to write, but the impact on their business is so incredibly large that it makes sense to charge them for the result and for the outcome, not for what it took in order for them to put it together. So on to the next slide. So a couple things that go along with that. When you're sending these messages, it's really important to identify yourself and build rapport with the customer. Remember, you're competing against robocallers. So you have to remind people, you gave me your number, right? Otherwise, they just assume this is somebody that shouldn't have my number calling me. If you do that, then you have a much better response rate. If you don't, and I've tried it the other way too, where it doesn't say anything that's normal. The first, actually, I shouldn't tell you this, but I will anyway. The first message we used as an automatic response was, hey, you there. Just the letter U, not even the word, right? It looks like something that a teenager would text if you didn't answer the phone. And the response was very high percentage, but the amount of anger that came with the second message back from the customers was not worth it. So you always want to be identifying yourself, building rapport, reminding people you got their phone number because they gave it to you. Twilio definitely has a dark side. If you want me to show you the flow for what a robocall looks like, I can do that at the end. But it's not something that you really want to get into unless you have permission from people to call their phones. It's not about trying to blow up the world with all of those calls. It's about trying to get to people the fastest that you can. And the people that want to be contacted. So the next question that follows from that just organically is, okay, you sent out a text message, how do you get the response? There's two real ways to do this for Twilio to send information back to FileMaker. The first way is to take batches of information and pull them out of the cloud in lists. And the other way is to push one piece of information into FileMaker as it comes in. So there's different reasons that you should do either one, depending on what your style is. But just to show you what that would look like for pulling information. So this is the method that people typically use when they have on-prem services, they're not in the cloud, they're not pulling one message out at a time, they're looking for a list. So you send out 100 appointment reminders. Those appointment reminders, doesn't matter when they come back. They can come back in an hour. So you don't have to run the script very often. If I pick, show me the messages from today, actually show me the ones from yesterday, make the request, it's going to send me back a list. There's 8 messages on this list, and I can get that information back into FileMaker where I can use it to add it to their record. So now that has a couple of limitations though. The first one is that this does not look like a text message. It looks like a bunch of computerese. So most people aren't going to be like, okay, cool, I'll just read the body of the message and then figure out who it's from. No, you got to write all the stuff on the other end in order to figure out this one attaches to that conversation, this one attaches to that customer. You still have a lot of writing to do. The other problem is the FileMaker script engine. So I don't know if you guys have ever gotten the error, the host capacity is exceeded, but it happens when the FileMaker script engine fails silently. When that happens, your whole server will start to fall apart and it'll look like it's running, but it's not. If you're really unlucky, then a local administrator will reboot the server without shutting down FileMaker server and disconnecting all the users first. Then you'll have problems with record collisions and you'll end up damaging the file, which means you'll be restoring from backup. So it's really just better to push the messages in one at a time. And probably the most important reason for that isn't even a technical one. It's that if I'm texting somebody, like if I have my phone out, I'm texting someone and there's 2 other responses that I need, 2 other text messages I need to respond to, I can send the first one, and then as soon as I'm done with the third one, if the first one hasn't responded, where does my phone go? It goes back in my pocket, it goes back on the charger, it goes back in my purse, it disappears. And unless I'm waiting for a response with the phone in my hand, the chance of you being able to communicate with that customer drops off significantly. So the better way to do things is to push the messages in through the FileMaker data API in real time. So when it comes to SMS and voice, we're all kind of spoiled. If FileMaker SMS doesn't perform well enough, if it doesn't perform as well as your iPhone, or if it doesn't feel natural enough, people are going to pull their phones out of their pockets and just use that instead. Also, voice is great for long, deep conversations, but they require whitelisting. You have to save the phone number in the whitelist through contacts, or you have to schedule the call. Email is great for business, but it's slow. I send out an email, I wait usually an hour or 3 hours or 2 days to get a response. SMS is meant for short, fast messages that need fast replies. And for that, pulling the messages out of the cloud in lists doesn't really work very well. Now, I'm not going to go through this whole chain of events. It's not easy to get the messages back into a FileMaker solution the right way, but I will go through the first couple of them. So somebody on a cell phone sends a message through a publicly switched telephone network that hits a phone number that you own at Twilio. There's instructions that you've given them. Send it via HTTP request to, I use Amazon because I wrote it before Claris Connect existed, but you can use Claris Connect if you want. Then that information goes into FileMaker through the FileMaker data API. From there, you have a raw record that's just a bunch of JSON. So you still have to make sure that that message goes to the right place, that it shows up at the right time, that it shows up with all of the images that are attached to it, that it repaints FileMaker's window is really the hardest one. So FileMaker is not designed to repaint a window when you're looking at it. It's designed to show you what's happened based on your input. So you click a button, it refreshes the screen. You click a portal, it refreshes the screen. It's not designed for you to do nothing and have the screen repaint on its own. It's just not a native function. So here's the big red easy button for that. So this is Mandelbrot MMS. This is fully functional MMS messaging. So I'm gonna show you a couple pieces of this, but one of the things I always show with these is you really should hide toolbars when you don't need them, right? So this is set up to work on iPads. It's designed for iPads. It's designed for iPhones. You also, if you want to, you can buy phone numbers from Twilio. Like, say I want to get a new, let's do an 847. I got a lot of customers in 847. Show me 20 of them. So it pulls the API, and here's 20 different phone numbers, right? So if I want to do the first phone number, I'm going to buy the phone number now without opening Twilio's dashboard. Cool. Now I have 2 phone numbers that I can hit from, right? So if I want to release that phone number, I can do this as well. Release the number, right? I'm going to hang on to it now, for now though. So I can also, if I already own a phone number, I can import it here, right? So as far as the natural abilities of these things though, say I want to send a text message. Hello, Sully. I send a message, and that goes through the Twilio API into my cell phone. There it is. So I'm going to send back a photo. Let's send a photo. What should we send? Nothing too controversial. Let's take a new one, right? Take a new one. Now, how many of you have had the situation where you send a photo to somebody and say, is it this part or is it that one? It happens all the time. Is it this button on the layout or is it that portal, or where's the problem in my code, right? It's a lot easier to figure out if you do it with photos a lot of times rather than just looking at it from, oh, of course the demo gods wouldn't be with me. Oh, there they are. Okay, so you see that automatically refreshed. There's the photo that I sent. I want to export this, then it's going to come up full screen. Now, if I want to point something out to a customer, I can say, here's the line that you need to be worried about. It's right there. Hit save. I'm going to put it on my desktop, name it with a bunch of A's, just so I can find it. Okay, so I'm going to send this back. Here's what you need. Then I'm going to insert the picture. Now this is this one. It's going to take a minute to insert. All this lives on the cloud. The files are on a FileMaker server that is on the cloud. So it uploads the photo into that container. As long as it meets a couple requirements, it's under a certain size and it's of the right file type, it's going to close that little paperclip pop-up on its own. Then it also, at the same time, it generates a URL. Like it generates a URL through the FileMaker data API where Twilio can download that information from the URL. Actually, I should show you. Right, I'm going to have to get up for this, right? Here it is. Here's that photo with the extra line. Hopefully you guys can see this, right? Now, hopefully that's enough to make your jaws hit the floor a little bit. But here's the thing that's really fun. If I go back and I punch in my cell phone number here, so I'm going to restore that, I can look at all the photos that I've sent from to that phone number, and it's right there. So there's a company that another developer is working with that hit me up about doing messages like this, where they're sending images from cell phones directly into their FileMaker solution. It's a company that was doing, well, they are doing drug rehab. So a lot of it probably is even court mandated, but if you're trying to wean somebody off of some sort of a drug, Sometimes there's prescriptions involved. Well, those prescriptions carry a high potential for abuse. So one of the ways to cut that abuse down is to send them a text message that says, give me a photo of all of your pills right now. Then they dump out the pills on their counter, take the picture and send it back, and that picture goes right back onto their record. So you can sit there in your office, in your clinic, and count the number of pills that they sent back. So there's a lot of other applications, but I thought that was one that I never thought would happen. I didn't even consider it when I was looking at this the first time. So cool. So let's move on. Actually, we'll minimize these guys, get them out of the way. So many things. Okay. So both just straight text messaging and picture messaging are available for purchase on my website. If you want to hit the big red easy button and skip however long you think it would take to write all that stuff. They're not very expensive, but before I tell you what they cost, I just wanted to kind of get a feel from you guys. If you want to type this into the chat or you want to just blurt out a number, great. If you know the answer and you've already been to my website, then please don't say anything at all. But how much would you charge a customer to build an application like that? What would it take? Would it take 10 hours or 20 hours or 30 hours, right? It'd take a lot. Everybody's got a number in their head by now, I'm sure, right? So more importantly, how much could you sell that for is a better question. So if you take a building block like that and you plug it into other people's solutions and then charge them to connect it to Twilio, you can take any different solution that's out there. You don't have to put the CRM online either. You can just leave the SMS part of it online or the MMS part online and then use that as an external data source, right? So
Sully,
I would,
if you don't mind, I figured you probably want to take a drink and I can give you a little break. And
thanks.
I'm still digesting what you have shown and all the possibilities. I even sent an email to our phone VoIP people to see what they can, hey, are you familiar with Twilio? But we have a question here, and I figured I'd ask that. And Wayne, you're more than welcome to ask it if you'd like. But if you are setting this up for a client, are you setting up these accounts in the name of each client, or are you setting them up under your own name and then reselling it as a package?
Right. So you can do it either way. The way that I've chose to structure my business is to sell them individually to each client. So in order to get those messages back, I'm going to roll back just a second real quick. In order to get those messages back in, you have to have something here in order to get those messages back, right? So I can set it up where it goes to an individual file for a specific client. So usually what I do is I put the file on their cloud server, or I set up a cloud server and put the file there, and then I point the messages at that file. So I could do that and still bill that, like I'd still bill Twilio through me if I wanted to. But for the volume that most of these people are doing, like if I had 500 customers or 500 different FileMaker licenses that I was dealing with, I might do that and become the phone company. But as somebody who's not interested in being the phone company, I'm just having each one of them sign up for their own Twilio account. They drop their own credentials in, and once their credentials are in the file, it just works. They don't have to do anything else. They have their account SID and their auth token live as custom functions inside that file. So every time it sends a message out or receives a message, it can reference those things, and it's unique to them. It's also important for privacy that they have their own file. You don't want to have 2 or 3 or 4 different companies using the same file bouncing around. There's licensing issues with that too. But I think it's important just to give everybody their own file. Now, then again, I'm only one guy, and I don't have a team of people working with me. If I had a bunch of people working with me, I might say, okay, well, we're just going to give people a little bit of an upcharge on this, and we'll call it a day. Instead of charging them 1.3 cents a minute, we'll charge them 2, and then we'll make a little bit of money being the phone company at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Same question, in addition to Twilio, though, with your, as in your diagram here, the Amazon API gateway, or as you mentioned with Claris Connect, what would you do there? Same kind of thing, set everybody up with their own account?
Right. I would set people up with their own Twilio accounts and their own Claris Connect accounts. And I'm used to using the Amazon APIs because I wrote the JavaScript to work as a connector. And all I have to really do is copy and paste that code into a new set of instructions for Amazon. If I'm Claris Connect, though, then that's specific to a single organization. So I'm going to have to go into Claris Connect and point the same information at the FileMaker solution anyway. So it's, again, is a question of how you're set up. I don't usually recommend, if somebody only needs text messaging or only needs picture messaging or voice or something like that, if they only need that one thing from Twilio, then I would just do the connector that I sell myself, which is Amazon. If they're looking for more than one thing, though, especially with the new pricing that's available for Claris Connect, it might make more sense to set them up on Claris Connect and then set up that Twilio phone number to push the messages through Claris Connect, because that's just one flow. It's one flow. You got a bunch of other flows you can use for everything else. And if you're already paying $600 a year as a FileMaker user for Claris Connect, you might just do it that way instead. It might be a little easier for you, but it's really kind of depends on how you're set up and what the use case is.
Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for asking the question. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. So it's only really a couple more slides here to go. Outbound voice takes a lot more effort. So one of the things that people miss about outbound voice is it's not really available in Claris Connect because you have to have a separate webhook. So SMS is an asymmetric communication medium. It doesn't matter whether or not you have both phones at the same time. You only need one phone that's the destination phone in order to deliver a message. So with voice, you need to hang on to both phones at the same time, and they have to be synced up. So the first thing you have to do is grab that first leg, and then you go around and get the second leg of the call. In order to direct that call to the second leg, though, you have to have a URL that has the instructions for how to connect the call. So that makes things a little bit more tricky, and it's something they haven't figured out how to do in Claris Connect yet. As far as what I like to do, though, is with ethical robocalling. So this is a very advanced concept, and I'll just kind of explain it to you. If you want to see a video of how this works, shoot me a text, or you have a use case for this that I haven't thought of. This is, for me, is for call centers where, or even just for myself, if only 12% of the people are going to answer the phone, what about the other 88? That's an hour and a half or 2 hours on the phone that I'm just listening to the phone ring and then saying my name and my phone number into voicemail. That's like soul-crushingly terrible for a workday. So instead, why not just automate that whole process? You have Twilio's answering machine detection AI, and the way that this works is you think about the way people answer their phones. If somebody answers their phone and says hello, it's a real short, like it's not a very long greeting. So Twilio hears a very short sound and then some silence. It's going to assume it's a human being. But if you get a voicemail, it's probably going to say, you have reached the cellular voicemail of so-and-so and whatever, right? So as long as it goes past a certain threshold, it's going to assume it's a machine. Now, Twilio's AMD also has the ability to listen for the beep when that voice stops talking. So when it says leave a message after the beep and it beeps, you can give it another instruction. And that extra instruction is usually going to be leave a pre-recorded voicemail. So for me, it's, hey, it's Sully with Mandelbrot LLC. Sorry I missed you. Give me a call back at 312-778-8787. Thanks, I look forward to talking to you, right? And I only have to say that once. It goes into all those voicemail boxes without me having to be on the phone. If a human's detected, then I have to actually pick up the phone, right? But my phone hasn't rung yet. So when a human's detected, it plays a different recording that says, hey, it's Sully with Mandelbrot LLC. Do you have a second to talk to me? right? And during the time that that recording is playing, my phone at my desk rings and I pick it up to the sound of my own voice greeting the customer. That way I can focus on something else for all but, what, 12% of the time? So I'm able to get, 5 or 10 times as much use out of voice as the average person is by putting together this program. I don't know if that, like, the real question though is, does that really count as a robocall? Like, it's a recording of my own voice. They get a live person. Is that really still like if a tree falls in a forest, right? So that's it. That's kind of what I had for you guys today. I'm going to open it up for questions here in a second. We've scratched the surface of some of the things that are available from Twilio. There's programmable voice and SMS, answering machine detection, robocalls, a bunch of different stuff that we've hit, but there's also a lot of other things that we haven't even touched upon. So if you have a question about these things, I'll try to answer them as best I can. I can't make any promises because Twilio is such a vast universe, but I really appreciate your time and your energy watching this stuff, and open it up to questions now so that I can help you guys with whatever you like.
The hand claps are going. Sully, thank you. Thank you very much. Everybody's muted. I should take it off. Thank you, Sully. Feel free, anyone, to fire away any questions. I'll just pause here for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
If you're silent too long, I'll come up with a question.
Yeah, it's okay.
This is Steve McGurk. What was the cost per text? Is there a general number there?
Yeah, the cost per text message, inbound or outbound, is 3/4 of a penny. So I believe picture messaging may be a little bit more, but the cost per text is pretty low. 10,000 text messages out costs $75. So it's very, very low.
Thanks.
Yeah. Can anybody think of a really cool use case for this that they hadn't thought of before for a customer?
Well, I have a bunch. It's not that I hadn't thought of it before, though. Actually, I've been looking into other services that do this. The kind of the new thought to me is doing it on my own in FileMaker, because it's a great concept. I was wondering though, could you talk a little bit more about what you're using to detect whether or not there's that beep or that silence to figure out if there's a person on the line or not? What was actually doing that?
Yeah. So let me just pull that up for you real quick. So I don't know if that has if there's an API call for that. That's something I believe you have to stick onto right onto the server, onto the webhook, right? It's called answering machine detection. So Twilio AMD is really what it is. Now the docs are really
of Twilio.
Yeah. So
cool.
Answering machine detection is available through Twilio. Now this is going to look a little bit scary, right? But if you look carefully, there's your curl, right? So answering machine detection is basically you make a call out or you get a call in. I guess not on a call, but on a call out, it's going to just listen to what's being said and then determine based upon a few different factors whether or not it's a human being. So there's a couple of a couple of parameters, like the timeout. How long is it going to listen to determine whether or not it's a machine? Then the speech threshold, right? Is it between 1 and 6 seconds where you listen for is this person talking or not? It's really a space between words. The speech end, and then the silence timeout. Set those 4 options, and you. Sorry, let me get the mic on. It's typing hard. Chris.
Yes.
Turn off your mic.
Oh, my bad.
No, it's okay. So yeah, the machine detection stuff here, you can set all kinds of different parameters in order to determine how long is it going to listen? What's it listening for? But the one that you're looking for is answered by, right? So the results of the call, detect message end, it does machine end beep, machine end silence, machine end other, right? And their documentation is actually pretty decent for this stuff, where you can actually tune it pretty well in order to get what you want out of it. So it just listens for the beep and then does whatever the next instruction is, depending on what you're looking to get done. So
That's awesome. That kind of gives me a follow-up question too. If Twilio has that built in, I wonder if Twilio also has the ability to dial directly into voicemail.
mm-hmm. Now, I don't know if that's a possibility. I've heard of that before, though, where it automatically dials voicemails, like phone systems that do that, and it's just a voicemail drop. I'm not sure if they have that functionality, but I've been surprised at the things that were available from Twilio for a long time. Last summer, I went to one of their road shows here in Chicago at the JW Marriott. That's where I got the Twilio Quest T-shirt, right? I also won a foam sword that in their programming competition at the beginning of the day, which was kind of fun. But the things that I've seen these guys do, they have other services like Autopilot, where it just constructs an AI where you can use it as the concierge for your hotel. They call in or they text information into the concierge, and they'll recommend a restaurant nearby. Or Flex, like they have a CRM that they use that's based on JavaScript React that integrates directly with Salesforce. Authy, right, two-factor authentication, and all the stuff they do with SIP phones. There's just a completely amazing galaxy of services these guys do, and I've only scratched the surface with what I've actually integrated into the FileMaker. So there's only so much you can do, right? We all get so busy with the projects that we're doing. Unless somebody has a need for something specifically, you probably won't hear about it. So that's a good question. I'll have to look at that and see if there's a way to do voicemail drops that